Hey everyone, my name is Seth. This is the Books Business Growth Podcast where we talk to Amazon sellers, e-commerce entrepreneurs and business owners about their journey, what makes them tick and why they have been successful. So without further ado, please sit back and enjoy the show. Luke Filer, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
No, yeah, well, my pleasure, but I'm glad you made the time to chat. It's always good to speak to a fellow Amazon seller. But for the people who don't know you, could you give us a little run through of your background going from, university up till now would be pretty cool.
Yeah, sorry, I just froze on my end for a second there, but I think you said background sort of from university till now, is that right?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So yeah, I jumped into university doing accounting and finance in Leeds, and after my first year, I was quite a long summer after university, or after each year of university, and I wanted to do something. So with doing accounting and finance, I was looking at like macro investing, which is more based on sort of business fundamentals and picking out companies that way. And I ended up stumbling across the likes of sort of Brock Johnson doing private label, and I eventually stumbled across Online Arbitrage, and that's where I dived into Online Arbitrage sort of 3.5 years ago now. Made first sale last day of August 2018, and from there the business, long story short, business now sits at ticking over at around sort of 60k a month, and I pretty much do next to nothing now. It's all sort of delegated, systemized to the team, which has allowed me to then go on to do other things, like with the brand Agile Entrepreneur, which I built, which is really about all things personal business development and really trying to provide sort of just help in that area to as many people as possible. Really, that's the overall goal.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, so we've already had Lloyd and Eamon on the podcast, which was great fun. So that's part of the reason I wanted to have you on as well. But there's lots to dig into there. So I'd like to go back to the university and then post that. So you left university before finishing, right?
Yeah, sorry, I should have made that clear. I dropped out in the second year just before the summer exams.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's something that we need to dig into a bit more, because it's a big decision, right? And actually, I spoke to when I was speaking to Eamon, he said that apparently you called him and he advised you not to leave university, which I found quite funny, because it's an Amazon entrepreneur telling a fellow, to be Amazon entrepreneur to keep doing the degree. I found quite funny. So what was going through your head during that summer that made you want to really have a go of it? Because for me, for example, I spent way too long working a corporate job, realising that I hated it, whereas you must have already envisaged that you were going to hate it and that you already had a bigger plan for yourself. But yeah, if you could just touch on that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I think it was really a case of, I was going to university, and there's a few things. It's like, for one, I didn't feel like university was helping me to become sort of an entrepreneur. It just always felt to me like I was going to do something business wise. I'd always kind of shown signs of that, and it just felt like it was true. And at university, doing things like consolidated accounts for like Asda Group, which supermarket here in the UK, big supermarket, and own a bunch of different companies, and learning how to prepare those sort of accounts is just like way above anything. It's just not even remotely useful for someone who wants to run like solopreneur, small team entrepreneur. Yeah, not even remotely useful. So don't get me wrong, there were some things that were really useful, like some elements more management accounting, which is more like sort of problem solving I enjoyed. And there were definitely really good aspects, like especially outside of the degree itself, like the networking and the social was really good and the sport was great and Leeds itself is amazing. So it wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm going to drop out. There's a bit of back and forth, but the other big element was really, it felt like university was sort of almost like a roadblock in terms of getting to where I wanted to be with the Amazon business. I was approaching exams and I wanted to take on some VAs, and it was just like, I didn't feel like I could really start working with VAs at the same time as going through exams. And so I was like, okay, I've got to wait till after my exams. I wasn't too keen. So that's why I kind of made a decision when I did. And I spoke to quite a few people about it to get their kind of thoughts. I generally am. I'm a fairly indecisive person, but at the same time, I'm not indecisive. I just like kind of think about decision making a lot, if that makes sense. Like I do get the decisions made. It's just like constantly on my mind for a while. So I spoke to a lot of people, really dived into it, just a lot of thought on it, and eventually just made a decision. And then from there, it was just really cool to kind of have that focus that I could just do it all the time and that kind of be my sole focus. It was really, really enjoyable that early stage of after dropping out of university, going and doing that. It was cool, but I didn't leave a job to do it. And I know, especially if you've got a job, I think people kind of look at it like, oh yeah, you made that decision, amazing. But at the same time, like, at least for me, and I know speaking to others, you kind of feel a bit of like, oh, did I make the right decision? And a bit of worry. So I don't know if you found that personally, but there was a little bit of that with the university. And I think there always will be that what if. And the big thing for me is that I dropped out into my second year, and then after that I was meant to be doing a year abroad in the States, and I was super pumped for that. That was the one thing that was kind of keeping me in university, was this idea of going and studying in the States for a year. Just like, that kind of US college culture, just getting a bit of a taste of that was very exciting to me. But I didn't feel like that was strong enough of a reason to stay in university, to go do more university, and I felt like I could get most of that experience in another way. So that's kind of the story, a bit of why I left university.
No, that's great. Thank you for sharing. But that sounds like the main draw of going into third year was potentially some good partying opportunities, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think most of the value I got from university was, as you say, the networking, the people I've met, I'm still friends with today. They're still dear friends. And I don't really think I got that much value from my course. But, and the thing is, you'd already experienced 2 weeks of university, two years. You already know what it's about. I'm sure you had loads of fun. So it's not, I guess it wasn't like you quit after a few months, which would be, I would say to anyone who quits university after a few months, it's probably not a good decision. But a question that just popped into my head when you were explaining that is, what would your advice be? What would your advice be to maybe your second year summer self, or someone in a similar boat thinking the same thing? Because would you dish out the same advice? Would you say quit? Would you? I don't know if your viewpoint's changing that at all.
Yeah, I think it really depends. I think with a lot of decisions, I think you've really got to dive into the reason why. And recently I've sort of been through this with relationship stuff. So my girlfriend and I broke up as a mutual thing around a couple of weeks ago. And it's been something that we had a bit of trouble around end of November as well. And the thing, kind of like the reason I'm talking about relationships, I think it's a bit easier to maybe explain, is, this kind of grass is always green on the other side thing. It's like, it might be tempting to have like this answer, to see this like answer, like, oh, I'm not enjoying where I'm at right now. There's a solution, like quit university, or, leave a girlfriend, or get a girlfriend, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of, especially in personal development space, this pursuit of like an answer, like a fix, like, oh, I'm not happy with my current situation. I just need to do this. I just need to meditate. I'm not happy with this. I just need to, wake up at 5 a.m. each day. And there's all these different like answers. And I think really you've got to sort of ask yourself why. So coming back to the university thing, I think for me, which I didn't really know I was consciously doing at the time, but now I reflect on it, I think it was quite wise, was like understanding like, okay, why do I want to leave university? Is it just because I'm avoiding the sort of, the responsibility of the commitment I made? Like, am I avoiding that responsibility of something I want to do because it's getting a bit difficult? Like, is that the reason why? So like in a relationship, if you're having a bit of, a fight, or you're avoiding that, it getting vulnerable, getting intimate with that person, or is it a case of like you genuinely really don't like this environment, this situation that you've built? So for me with university, it was that I wasn't really enjoying that environment, and I was really enjoying kind of going into the business thing. It's not like I was like, oh, I want to get rid of this thing and then I don't know what I'm going to do. It's like I had this, I want to do more of this Amazon business, and I want to do these things, and like university is kind of a roadblock for that. And I went and I basically gave myself a deadline of the time, and I was like, these are the things I'm going to do to then make a decision with conviction. And I think that's the big thing. It's like being able to make a decision with conviction and then know the decision is made, not being then like and ahhing about it. So like really for me, that was setting that deadline, going and speaking to a bunch of people, like journaling sort of, again, it wasn't really like journaling for me. It was just writing my thoughts, like pros and cons and all these kind of things. And diving into that, doing like sort of research on the topic, what other people are saying. And then I just ultimately made that decision. So I think that's what I would say. It's not like a drop out, don't drop out. It's about understanding, trying to dig into that reason why, and then just making that decision and knowing whichever way you go, it's going to be okay. There's not like a right or wrong answer necessarily. It's just a different path that you're choosing. And it's not like forever, but it's like you're just going to choose a path, and whichever you choose is going to be okay. And I think that's a big thing in terms of positioning. Like, you know, it's not about, oh, am I going to make the wrong choice? It's like, okay, which choice do you choose? And then going and living, enjoying that path. Does that make sense?
No, that totally makes sense. It kind of reminds me of a lot of what I've been seeing and listening to content-wise recently. It seems like what you're saying is you want to focus really intently on the decision, make sure you are, as you say, like weighing up the pros and cons. But once you've made the decision of the decision you're going to make, just go all in on that, because like, what's the quote? It's like, inaction is, I'm not going to butcher the quote, but like, not making a decision is a terrible decision in itself, right? Like dilly-dallying around, not like, I think that's you're never going to do. I don't think you're going to do well in business if you're spending a week on a decision that should take a day, right? Because it's all about moving forward. Don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
and it's like even making a decision. I think there's a lot of avoiding what I'm going to call diving into the fire. Like, you know, you have this nagging thing inside you which is uncomfortable. It's not comfortable to explore, but actually exploring those different points and different considerations can be uncomfortable. And really, it's like getting all that onto the table, the benefits and drawbacks and how you're really feeling. And I think things like journaling are really good for things like that, and just really diving into it. And it is uncomfortable, but I think that's the way you can really make that decision. It's so easy on lots of different levels to just have distractions or whatever and avoid that decision making. I think that's the key. It's like diving into those considerations.
Right. So you're saying essentially that, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but so if you have a situation where you want to push your comfort zone and it scares you a bit, do you think that you should always push into that? Because I'll give you an example. Is that I've wanted to get into wholesale for a while, but just never really dove in because I essentially don't really want to cold call loads of different suppliers, right? Because it's that is pushing the comfort zone. And I was thinking at some point I've got to do it. And I spoke to mutual friend Thomas Parkinson. I said, I think this is the way I need to go. And then his advice, and advice from someone who's doing way better than me in Amazon, was like, no, you need to hone in on the books, which is something that actually isn't pushing the comfort zone for me. But he might be right, he might not be. I don't know if you've got any like thing to elaborate on that, because I do think pushing comfort zones is obviously always going to help you grow, but is it always the best decision?
Yeah, I don't think it's about like pushing comfort zones or not. I think it's about diving into that. So it's like for you, if you dive into that, if it's cold calling that's like stopping you, and then you're like actually, you're not kind of pushing that away inside of you. It's like embracing that and going, okay, well, why don't I want to do like the cold calling, and actually like exploring that. And if you decide, that, okay, for example, honing in, focusing on the books is the way to go, and it's not like, if it's a case of you evaluate, the wholesale versus expanding into wholesale versus just continuing with books, and you genuinely decide like, okay, I want to just focus on books, great. But if it's a case of you really want to get into wholesale, but you're not doing it just because you don't want to do some cold calling, then I think you can dive into that in terms of like, okay, well, why don't I want to do the cold calling? Like just exploring that and, okay, how can I tackle that? And like actually going, okay, this is a problem. Like, what is the solution? Is a solution. Maybe I can get someone to help me, or maybe it's something I can, commit to. Like maybe I can work on doing it I don't know, nothing really comes to mind at the moment, but maybe there's a way in which you can progress with that. It does, on a bit of a different note, does give me a bit of a flashback to my university part-time work, which was like cold calling, and yeah, that was very nerve-wracking. So I do feel you, but yeah, to summarize, I think it's not, it's not like, I think pushing the comfort zone and playing on your edge is great, but in this case, it sounds more like trying to get to the grips of what is the best decision for you, and then is that like avoidance of cold calling having an impact on the decision, or have you like honored that that's there, and it's not stopping you from doing the wholesale if you genuinely think that's the best decision for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. It just, part of me thinks that to be a better entrepreneur, just in all respects, if you get better at selling, you're going to be a more successful entrepreneur. And like you mentioned the cold calls there. I've done a few jobs which are, for example, in Australia, I think you spent time in Australia, but I did that thing in shopping malls where you have to go up and cold approach people and try and sell stuff. And I was selling some dodgy charity ticket. It was weird, and I only did it for a few weeks, and it was kind of fun when you got a sale, but it was scary. Like you say, like cold calling people every morning you have to push yourself to really like gee yourself up and motivate yourself. But like, what are your thoughts on sales? Do you think it's completely necessary? Because I feel like it's in every business. So yeah, do you need to be good at it?
I don't think it's completely necessary. Again, I think it comes down to, what do you want to achieve? Like, for example, if there's people out there who are doing very well on the tech side of things, who can delegate that. But I think even if you're going to delegate, you want to have some understanding. But let's look at, like, for example, people who are doing full-time, like maybe crypto, blockchain type stuff. You don't necessarily really need to do any sales there. I think sales is a super, super valuable skill, and it can help, but it's like, it ultimately comes down to what do you want. Like, you don't need to necessarily sell if you really don't want to. I think, again, it comes down to, like, what do you want? If you want to have, like, say, coaching business, for example, then yeah, the ability to sell is amazing. But there's always, like, there's generally, maybe not always, but I can't think of an example where there isn't. Like, there generally is a workaround, and it comes down to, like, what is that thing you want to achieve? And if that is really blocking you, like you really don't enjoy sales, like maybe it's something that can delegate. But I think having that sales experience really helps. For example, for me, I don't enjoy selling really, but it's something that I did and I learned, partly because of where I didn't necessarily have the business in a setup that made sense to delegate the sales, and partly because I felt like it was good to learn and to understand. So then when I delegated it, that would help. But yeah, it really depends on what you want to achieve. Like, you look at, I've read, I was listening to Elon Musk's autobiography. The autobiography, I guess, mixed up between two, but one of them. I just finished that recently, and Elon's got all right at sales, he gets in the public face, but there's plenty of people in sort of Tesla, SpaceX, and all these companies that I would consider quite entrepreneurial. Maybe that in the larger companies, it's not just like them, but people who are kind of more behind the scenes and aren't sort of selling. And I think when you look at small entrepreneurs, especially the ones that are like visible, a lot of them are going to be doing some sort of selling probably, and so it might look like you need to be able to sell. I don't think that's necessarily the case. It just depends on, like, what do you want to do, and acknowledging that. And if it's like, okay, sales is going to help me, potentially it's something you dive into, and maybe not. But I don't think it's like you need to be able to sell.
No, that's super helpful. I will change this conversation from being a therapy session now. But no, but Elon Musk though, that's interesting. You say that he's good at sales. I wouldn't. Well, he's definitely not conventionally good at sales. Do you think he's good at sales just because he is such a unique human and he's created such a unique business that he's got that platform that means that whatever he says, it's gonna create a buzz, right? It's like his Twitter's so valuable just because of what he's done rather than how he does it.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what is sales? To me, sales is convincing someone on a future outcome, a path to achieve a future outcome that they desire. So for me to be able to like lead, especially to lead a team, I think you need to be good at sales to an extent, because you've got to get people on that journey to what does Elon want to achieve, and then get people to come along that journey with him. And okay, it's not maybe like, it's not necessarily getting onto a sales call and selling someone directly like that. But even now, yeah, Elon's got a very big platform and is super well respected. But that book, I think it was released around 2014 when, okay, Tesla and SpaceX and that were doing fairly well. But you look at, share price, for example, of Tesla back in 2014, I think it was like $25-$30, and it's like $900 now. And that only really started rocketing, I think, like 2019. So it's like he went from, okay, not so much in Tesla and SpaceX and that, but in his earlier companies, he really built those a lot from the sort of ground up and got people, to work with him and to lead those people. So, and like actually getting in the public eye, yeah, to me, that is part of the sort of sales, I guess, element. So yeah, at the end of the day, those sales is super broad. And I think it just comes back to, like really, I think this is the part of the problem is like looking, as opposed to looking for the external answers, like what are other people doing? Oh, that's cool. I want to do that. Actually go, no, like, what is the answer inside of me that like I want to do, and how can I then go about doing that? And if sales comes across there, like awesome. At the end of the day, sales is going to help a lot, even in just general day-to-day life in terms of engaging with people. I think it's super, super helpful. So definitely not a bad skill to learn.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's nice that you mentioned team building and sales, because I guess if you want to be a good leader, you can either lead by fear, right, or what's the other word? You can either like admiration, but you'd rather want to be the leader that people actually, your staff like you rather than fear you, right? I don't want to be Vladimir Putin, but so let's turn the table. Let's actually talk Amazon now, because you, as you said, you kind of the too long didn't read version of what you achieved is your first sale August 2018, and then you pretty quickly got up to quite big numbers, didn't you? Which is obviously there's a few people doing that, but you obviously put yourself out there on Facebook group, and yeah, your numbers were very impressive. So you said you stumbled upon a private label course first. What was the catalyst towards you being able to scale so fast? Like, did you do a course? Was it calling people who were doing better than you? Was it books? Was it mindset? Was it a bit of everything? If you could elaborate a bit more, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think part of it, I think with arbitrage, like online arbitrage, which is purely what I do. I did a bit of retail at the start, but yeah, really, online arbitrage, it's really that ability, I think, to, like, for me, maths is quite a strong point, and it's not like arbitrage is complicated stuff, but just that kind of management accounting type stuff, really, where I can, for me, it was really breaking down where I want to get to and then how to get there. And there are people that definitely helped along the way. So, for example, the likes of Eamon and the likes of Thomas Parkinson and these kind of guys who, I looked at, the great thing with arbitrage, there's lots of people already doing it, and you can figure out how, they are doing it through courses, coaching, or even just finding the people and just, networking. I went to a lot of physical meetups, and it's crazy the amount of, during COVID, it was really interesting. Like, I put out a poll in the Ideal Entrepreneur group, and there's so many people who said they wanted a meetup, and like, how many people actually turn up? It's these kind of things that I think make a big difference, going and networking and meeting people. And yeah, it's very interesting. Like doing the difficult things, I would say it's difficult because I'm trying to think of what are the things that for me really help, but there's one thing. But if I had to summarize it, I would say it's like diving into the uncomfortable. And a good example of this is, you might see it when you create content. It's like, if I put a post up of, I just reached, I just did £1,000 in sales in a day, or like, here's my first million in sales, or here's my first sale, or like, here's all these boxes I packed, or these kind of things. It's like, people are looking at it and it's like, oh, awesome, and they feel like it's achievable or whatever. And when you put something out there that's like genuinely, I think, going to help someone succeed in the business, so like maybe something that's, about VAT or about some sort of technical thing, and it actually requires effort on the part of the other person to utilize that information, it gets a lot less, interest and engagement, because it is difficult and people don't want to, they might want to, but they don't put in that work. And like, this is the kind of thing, like physical meetups and stuff like that, they really do help. It's easy to spend the whole day sourcing. It's easy to kind of just source, but the analogy is, it's like if you have a blunt axe and you spend all your day trying to chop trees, you're not going to get very far. Sometimes you need to sharpen the axe. So to go back to it, I think really for me, it was like, where do I want to be with the Amazon business? And really then building backwards from that. So I always knew like quite early that I wanted to have, systemized and delegated outsourced type business. That was quite apparent quite soon. And so then I did the actions that I knew would help me to get there. I barely ever sourced the product. I knew how to purchase. I could make purchasing decisions. I could use, but then I had like VAs, deal sheets, all these kind of things to get a deal to me. But the key thing is like then being able to make a purchasing decision. Yeah, like these kind of things. And then, getting like a prep center and getting VAs and all these kind of things that are helping me to get to where I want to be. They're actions that aren't linear outputs. Like if you just spend hours and hours sourcing, okay, you could argue that as that improves and as you learn, then you can systemize and delegate, fine. But if you spend all your time like sourcing, and then you get a linear output in terms of the money that you then get out of it, which is fine. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it comes down to really what do people want. If someone's happy, to spend, I know, for example, like Daniel Gilmore had an example of someone he's not anymore, but for quite a while, he stayed underneath the VAT threshold and was pretty happy, like just spending, I think it was sort of 10, 20 hours a week, ticking over at a pretty nice return on his time. And he was happy with that. So again, it comes down to, what are your preferences? And they can always change, but like, what do you want? And working towards that, I think, is the key that helped me.
That's a great answer. And I really like the blunt axe analogy. That's very familiar to my story before hiring VAs. But I guess I didn't even think about outsourcing. And I'm not sure why that was. I just didn't really, I'm not sure whether I saw VA content and just dismissed it because I knew I could do it on my own and I was in that employee mindset, or whether the algorithms didn't favour me in that regard. But obviously you're aware that if you don't have startup capital, it's difficult to make that leap to hiring a VA out, because if you've got an employee mindset like I did, you're going to think, oh, it's going to take them a really long time to get skilled up, to get an ROI on my time. So did you have savings that you popped into, or did you use loans, or did you just fund it? How did you fund those scaling with the VA so quickly?
Yeah. So I think first the thing I'd say with the VAs is like, yeah, you've really got to break down. Again, it comes down to the mapping it out, like how are you going to get a return on what you're paying them, and also the energy you're putting in and the time that you're putting in, and you need to calculate that. So for me, this is something I worked on a lot with Thomas, in that, I looked at how much am I paying the VA, how much I'm going to be spending on that stock, and really looking at the cash flow, like the actual cycle there in terms of, like how long is it going to take for when I start paying them and putting the money into the products to when I get a return. And then, like how much they need to be sourcing based on the stat, like the data, to actually then for me to generate a profit based on the VA's, having a VA and like on their salary. And so calculating all those things and having the metrics to track, super important. And that'll tell you how much you need. So from there, to answer your question, it was really a mix. Like I didn't have too much saved. I can't remember exactly now. I've mentioned it in previous sort of interviews and stuff, but it's been quite a while. Like I think I started with a few £100, and then I might have had like £1,000 overdraft. I probably had like a few £100 more saved. And then I actually, it's funny, I ended up coming second in my year, and I got a scholarship, and I got like £200 a month for 10 months for that scholarship. And I asked a friend of mine if he'd be willing to give me £2,000 up front, and I could just give him the £200 a month. And he was thankfully, happily, he said yes to that, which really helped me, because then I could utilize that £2,000. And then I got things like, I'd never really had a credit card. So even like I got a credit card, I think it was like £450 credit limit. It's nothing, but all these things helped. And then my dad loaned me money over time, and like, like I've always had kind of business stuff. So from the age of like 11, secondhand shop to 15, I use my dad's PayPal account to like sell virtual game currency and these kind of things. So I built up a bit of trust and respect there, so that over time, like my dad lent me, I think to the extent it got to like maybe 6 months in, it got up to like 8K. And then, yeah, so I got money from all these different places like over time. And I'm super fortunate, to have people like my friend who I could approach, and like my dad there. And so, yeah, just lots of different things. And I think, again, it comes back to really, at the end of the day, everyone's going to have different resources and things available to them. But it's really understanding the numbers that are important, because if you're going to take like loans or credit cards, it's really understanding like, okay, being disciplined with paying back without interest, or, loans to make sure you're able to cover the interest, or, like if you get a VA, making sure that you have enough cash flow to utilize what they're going to be providing, or then maybe being creative and like sharing a VA with someone. It's all these kind of things that really the key is coming back to what is your personal situation, and understanding that, and not trying to shortcut it, but really diving into those details of your own personal situation.
Yeah, no, I really like what you're saying there. That's spot on. It sounds like you didn't have a massive amount of cash coming in, so I only ask because everyone asks about how much money you started with, and it's quite funny because you might agree, but I just think it doesn't really matter, and then people don't really want to hear that from people that are doing quite well, and they always assume, or they'll write you off if you had £30,000 to start with or something, which I actually just don't think is fair, because if you can make something work, like for example, didn't Donald Trump get given 50 million by his dad or something like that? But he still built wealth, and he's still a great businessman, right? So you can't really take that away from him. I don't know what your thoughts are on that. Whether, I don't know really.
I think the sad thing is they're often looking for that answer, but they're also often looking for like a reason to justify a lack of action, in the sense of, well, it's all right for this person because they've got X, Y, or Z. And at the end of the day, like, it doesn't fucking matter about anyone else. It's like, you can look at other people and you can think whatever you want, but that's not going to change your life. If you go and look at Joe Blogs and go, oh, okay, well, this person's like a prick, he's got a billionaire for a dad and he just splashes his cash around all over and whatever, and you can, or this influencer on TikTok who's got an OnlyFans and is only rich because of that, and just lucky they've got a good body, or what, I don't know. Like the point is I'm trying to make to illustrate is like, you can spend all your time under the sun complaining about how unfortunate you are, or why you can't do something because you haven't got X, Y, Z. And like, I think that's what you get into with the Amazon. It's like people look for this reason. Okay, oh, well, this person started with, 10K and I've only got a couple of grand. So I can't do that. That's why they're getting ahead of me. So I'm okay. I'm great because, that it's their excuse to kind of make themselves feel better. I think in a lot of cases, and like, that might be hard for some people to hear, but, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here again to like, cause my mission is to really to help as many people as possible to generate legacy creation, so business and personal development on that, to help entrepreneurs to create value in the environment. And going back to the point, it's like, yeah, it's, or for example, I get it a lot. It's like, it's all right for you, Luke, you don't have kids, you don't have this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, great, Elon Musk got fucking 5 kids. I'm not saying it's not like, well, and then people are like, oh yeah, well, Elon Musk is a freak who's been divorced, doesn't care about his family or whatever. And it's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't fucking matter. It's like, you've got your life. You can go and look at all these other external factors, or you can control what you can control and dive into that and work on yourself and get that fulfillment. So yeah, that's my thoughts. It's like, whatever hardships you've got in life, maybe the world does hate you. So what, it's like tough shit. That's life. And, maybe one day I'll look back on it if I, touch wood, something happens to me and I go, oh, I was a little young dick or whatever, but I don't think so. I think, it's just really about controlling what you can control.
That's a great point. Controlling what you can control is so key. And as you say, I think people want that excuse to say that they can't do something so that they can then binge watch the latest Netflix thriller, right? And that's the reason why they'll say, oh, this person did well because of this and I can't. It's a great point. But I'd like to go back to scaling your Amazon business. So you hired a bunch of VAs. Did you encounter any obstacles with growing your team? And also, do you have tips and tricks for building a team? Because I'm kind of scratching my own itch here in the sense that I have very recently I've gone over the past year, I've gone from 1 to 6 VAs, and it's still a totally new experience for me, you know, being one year into being a manager. I never really had a managerial role in my corporate career. So if you could help me and the listeners with with those questions there, that'd be cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I've never really had management type stuff, but it's just like learning through experience and experience of others. This is one thing I think it's, you know, we're fortunate in this day and age to be able to have such immediate access to so much information from others and documented stuff that I've really leveraged. And I think really utilizing that is the key. You know, you don't have to trial everything and learn yourself. Like, yes, there is a part of that, but you can make that path easier for yourself. You know, okay, for example, I try and use analogies where I can. And have you seen Squid Game?
I have, yeah. I enjoyed it.
For some reason, I'm going back to like right at the end where there's like glass bridge, and it's like I'm envisioning the people like jumping, and then like either they crash or they, you know, the solid one, or they fall to the ground. And I'm like, you know, you can see other people and learn like from them, which is the route to go. You don't have to go and like learn yourself the hard way, which maybe is not the best analogy, but
no, that's a great analogy.
You don't need to
Savage
make the
one.
same mistake. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily make the same mistake. So, you know, for example, for me, I was lucky, like Thomas Parkinson helped me quite a lot when I was getting started. But going back to your question, I think really understanding people, like a lot of people probably got Filipino VAs and the culture, quite shy, quite to themselves. And so I think the biggest thing for me has just been promoting that environment where people can be human, in the sense that, you know, I'm creating an environment where I'm trying to, you know, people have got an issue, to really create a safe space where my team can talk about that, or they can bring that to the question. To just, I don't know, like it's hard to pin down to one thing, but for example, in the Amazon space, you know, sourcing leads, if they're sourcing products, imagine if you spend your whole day like trying to find products and then you didn't know if they were any good or not. So what I'm trying to say is like feedback on the task. Like, so for example, did we buy that product? Didn't we? Like, if not, why? Like, if yes, why? Are they getting feedback on their work? You know, it's putting yourself in their position, I think, is a big thing. And I'm really trying to just over time create that safe space where they can say whatever sort of they are feeling. You know, other things like just being very clear with what you want in terms of tasks. Like, you know, if you're delegating a task, say like, okay, I want you to spend, what's the rough, like the maximum time? Like, when do you want it done by? Is it a priority? Like, what is the outcome of the task, the hopeful outcome? Can you be super clear? Like, for example, for me, I like to do screen recording to reduce ambiguity. Like, just trying to put yourself in their shoes, I think, is a lot. Yeah, there's quite a lot on this. I did actually put together, you know, I'm not here to like promote it, but I did put together a small course on this. You can cut this out, but I'm happy to give you access to that if you want. Just let me know. Just drop me a message to remind me after, because I think it'll help you. But from what you said, but yeah, like on the management side of things, I think it's just really putting yourself in their position and like remembering that they are human. So for example, like another thing is having, you know, I've got different teams, different businesses, and we have once a month on a Friday, just like we'll play like Among Us or another random game and just chat and kind of just actually socialize a little bit to try and create that social engagement and let the team, you know, for example, one of my friends, I can't remember why, but like he had different VAs and he kept them, you know, he didn't let them have contact with each other. I can't remember, there was a reason why, but I can't remember. But for me, it's like, you know, I found the team become good friends with each other, some of them, and like they like to communicate with each other and ask each other for help and things like that. So all these kind of things, you know, just at the end of the day, they are human, and remembering that, I think is kind of key. Like, remember like what is a target outcome, and in the day, what's the best step to get there? Like going and being someone who, as you kind of said, like leads by fear is not really the way. It's like, what's the best way to get that outcome? Like, even if you're angry, and this has been a big thing for me, like, can I take a step back and actually go, okay, like, can we look at what's happened here and how can we improve that moving forward? And coming with that attitude, I found the team really respects that, and it actually helps them to learn, which, you know, is a fulfilling thing to be able to learn and to grow. Does that help? Something I talk about for hours, so I've tried to summarize it a bit.
No, that's a great answer. I think it's worth talking about for hours, not just because I'm in the midst of building a team, but I think anyone who wants to build a successful Amazon business has to build a team, and you've got to build a good team to get good profits and good sales, right? So, but would you say you were, because you hadn't done this before and you weren't necessarily following, you know, a university curriculum, would you say you doing this, you were becoming a manager and a leader via trial and error kind of? Because I would say that's how I've been approaching it. I've been seeing what works and what doesn't, and iterating what does work and then cutting out what doesn't work.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, that's it. Like, I've tried to get resources from, you know, from Thomas, from different YouTube videos, from all these kind of things, and then also figured out what works myself. Yeah, like this is, you know, like at iGen Entrepreneur, I try and create like blueprint type structures. Like that's the kind of training we provide, because for me, it's like trying to make it as easy as possible for others based on, you know, like what have I learned, and then how can I make it easier for people who are going down the same route. Like that's really the value, you know, like I'm not, you know, this is, I think, where there's a bit of confusion on like the whole course thing. It's like, I'm not giving people, like, it's not like a franchise, like, you know, it just happens, or it's not an answer, you know what I'm trying to say. It's not like, okay, you buy the course and then things are going to magically happen. It still requires work, but, you know, the blueprint, the idea is it's going to help you, support you. So, you know, summarize that information, like cut out those things. So to answer your question, it's like, yes, it's trial and error, but it's trial and error with assistance, initial assistance, so that there's less, you know, like I'm cutting out some of the trial and error. I'm trying to go on the, you know, the path that's close to the end goal, you know, instead of being like this all over the place. I'm kind of like a bit more like that. It looks like a fish, but yeah, a bit less variation from the end goal, a bit less pain along the way.
No, that makes total sense. I'm only asking because I feel like I'm hoping that it'll give value to listeners, because if they hear that two people who are building teams, we didn't know what we were doing at the start, right? It is kind of a fake it till you make it. That's the way I see it. But now that we know how to do it, and it's cool that you're teaching what worked and what didn't, and then that's why people should potentially like join your courses if they want to. They're obviously on the iGen Entrepreneur Facebook group. We might as well talk about that a little bit more, because so you scaled your Amazon business and then it's pretty much automated. So you decided, well, I can't just sit on my hands all day. So you created the iGen Facebook group and you've created courses from there. You've also got NFT stuff going on, which we'll talk about in a bit, because I'm keen to learn a bit more about NFTs. But yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about iGen, what your goals are for the future of iGen?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just like I'm on this mission to really try and, you know, grow, and I don't like it because it sounds kind of cliche, but to really bring out the best version of myself, like from the best version of me, and then, you know, really try and do that internal work to really dive into that. And that's a mix of, for me, you know, entrepreneur business development and personal development. And so I'm on that journey, and I like then helping to impact others on that journey, and really like looking at the meaningful things, like really going on that journey and then trying to create this. I almost like, you know, my sort of North Star statement is that I am the architect or the catalyst for people's lives. It's like this idea that I am constantly like building this, you know, this catalyst, this thing that's going to help improve the lives of other people. That's the, you know, like the horizon. So it's not really a goal. Like it's never like, okay, I have achieved that. It's like always a continuous thing. And so that's really like, well, you know, it's like, how many people can I impact? And then like, how deeply can I impact these people? So then it's like, you know, we'll talk about NFTs, but like the NFT project is going to really come into that, because it's going to help me to reach more people. But then okay, iGen Entrepreneur, and this, you know, this wasn't apparent at the start. It's changed over time. Like initially, really, iGen Entrepreneur came from, well, for one, I was like, you know, I saw that it just seemed kind of cool to like document the journey and share what I'm kind of doing with the group, with the intention of down the line, like maybe doing some like affiliate marketing, or maybe like, you know, maybe creating a course at some point, because like initially I started the Amazon business because I wanted to make money, and like then it's like I want to make money, and so that was really a driving thing. Like honestly, I just really wanted to make money for a lot of the time, and like it was almost, I really wanted to make money, and a byproduct of that was like helping people. And now it's kind of flipping. It's like now it's more because now I've made quite a lot of money, and it's like, okay, that's kind of cool. And don't get me wrong, I want to have more money. There's some cool shit you can do with money, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it's a bit empty if you just have the money. So now I'm getting a lot more satisfaction, really diving deeply into like, okay, well, how can I most powerfully help people? And so that's where things are starting to turn. So really the journey of Ideal Entrepreneur was like this, okay, it's a way for me to make more money. And like when I systemized the Amazon business, that's when I came back from Australia and when COVID struck, and I was like, literally got to the point where, yeah, it was all kind of systemized. And I was like, well, what do I do with myself now? And it was really appealing to go and build this like, this blueprint structure. And so I did. And then from there, it's like really, then I brought on, you know, as you mentioned, Lloyd and Eamon, and then like there's Liam as well, and there's other team members. And now even the Amazon training is like super delegated. Like it takes me probably a couple hours a week to do that. And so now like that's evolved into really like, what are the next things? Like, how can I really pursue that? Like, how do I have the most impact on people's lives? And so there's a lot of learning that I'm doing now, a lot of my time like learning stuff and implementing it on myself, and then that's really transitioning into this NFT project, which is really to reach more people.
Cool. Okay, so we will touch on NFTs, but I wanted to ask one question there because that interested me, that money is a key driver for you. Obviously it's a key driver for everyone. You'd be lying if you're not. Like until you've got money, that is going to be one of your key drivers, right? So a lot of people will know the study where it's like once you've made, say, $50,000 or $70,000, anything above that, you don't exponentially, it doesn't increase your happiness, right? So when you said you can do some cool shit with money, I'm just intrigued, like what cool shit do you want to do with your money?
I don't know, like for me, so there's kind of two things there. Like I agree that I think money does have an impact for people, but I think it also does vary a lot, like in terms of how it has that impact and like what that thing is. And I won't go into that into too much detail, but like for me especially, if I dive deep and journal on it, it's like this success equation that's running in my head. And like really, if I just give an example, that success equation is for me is that like I will be, you know, like happy, fulfilled, whatever, when I have enough money. So what's running for me like day to day is I don't have enough money. And so that plays out in two senses. One, it's then like a desire to make more money. And it's also then like a desire almost to like not spend money or to accrue money because it's like, I don't have enough, you know? And again, I won't go into too much detail, but like, this is really understanding like, okay, what is my relationship with money, which has really been serving and helping me. And it's like something I've dived into, and it's going to be different for different people. And the reason why I mention that is because like that awareness has really then been helping me to dive into it. It's like, okay, well, like for example, and this has really been helped by AJ, Amex, and Jonathan Heston, my mentors. Like I do want to mention them because they're awesome, and I think everyone should check them out. But anyway, like doing some stuff around like this in terms of like diving and like, you know, literally just listing what are 50 desires with money, like what are the things I want, and like really like reframing money as this tool to then help achieve these things. Has been super powerful. Then, for example, reading, I think I've got it here, Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game, and all these kind of things have been pretty useful. And so going back to things like, you know, cool stuff with, I think that's like what is cool stuff with money, but, you know, even just the ability for like last month I was in Gran Canaria and to get like this awesome, like the apartment that I want, you know, like it's not like this, I don't want it for any external reasons. It was just like, the internet was amazing. I love being besides the beach. I love having a balcony for like the fresh air. It had like a stand-up desk. It had like an office chair. It had washing machine. It had dishwasher. It had just all these things that I just wanted to have, and I could afford it easily within means. And like to be able to have that is just amazing. So yeah, I can't remember exactly what your question was. Sorry, I don't know if that answered it. I got a bit distracted.
I think the question was, what cool shit do you want to do with your money? But you've kind of answered it there.
Right.
I would say, I would agree with that in the respect that, yeah, money is just a tool. It's not going to make you happy, but it's, the way I see it is, if I want to move to London for a month and I go on Airbnb, and the Airbnb that I want to get is mega expensive, but the cheaper one I'm going to go for just because it's cheaper, right? That I want to be in a position where I'll go for the mega expensive one because I can. I'm not going to spend money on really expensive clothes or like stuff like possessions that I just don't care about, but I want the freedom to be able to do the stuff. I don't want to have to say no just because of budget, right? Which just sounds like kind of what you were saying there.
Yeah, and that's been like even a challenge in itself for me, like going back to that success equation, like because I'm like running this thing in my head where it's like I don't have enough money, even though I've got plenty of money there, and it's like that is the use of it. It's like there's this apartment in Gran Canaria which is maybe 25% more expensive than another apartment. It's like part of me is like, we'll just get that other apartment. But then, like this was a bit of a breakthrough of actually choosing this apartment that it's like, these are the things that I want, and actually really honoring that and choosing it. And I had like an amazing time. So yeah, there is, as you mentioned, it's a difference, I think, between like just going and buying sort of stuff because maybe it's not something you genuinely want, and for other reasons, like, for what other people are going to think potentially. I think there is a big difference there, and really like honoring yourself in terms of what do you genuinely want, and diving into that and having the the money to achieve those things. Like I think that's pretty powerful. And it's the paradox now kind of for me is like, for a lot of those things that for pretty much all of the things really I do want, it's like I have that money, but it's like really this thing inside of me running, which I've been working on, and it's not as present now, but still there, where it's like I don't have enough money. So there's like kind of a paradox there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there is always a paradox though, because like you'll probably get to a money goal that you thought. Like I've probably hit quite a few money goals where I thought, oh, I'll be happy here, and then you're always just constantly thinking, oh no, there's that next level to climb. So do you think that if you like won the lottery tomorrow, would you keep doing what you're doing at the moment? Like, would you change tactics? What do you think you'd do?
I think I'd probably change a bit. I don't know, it's tough. I think I'd probably be more aggressive, in terms of some of the things I invested in, like for the business growth. I'd probably be more aggressive there. I think that's what would change. And then like I'd probably, depending on how much the lottery was, like the one thing I don't have, which I do want, is like a dream house. So I would probably look to buy that property. Besides from that, not that much. Like I do want to get a Tesla through the business, and it's quite a lot of wait time. So I'd probably like bribe someone and hire up in the waiting list or some shit, but which I can't really justify now, but I probably would. But in terms of like what I'm doing work-wise, I don't think it would really change that much, because for me now it's like, it really is this case of like I've got recurring income streams that really cover my day-to-day, and like I put in 50% of everything I earn into like my wealth building stuff for that like property, and I'll hit it in a few years' time, assuming nothing changes. So it's, and like I kind of have everything that I want the day to day. Like this is the really interesting thing. It's like diving into, what is my target income? Like actually getting really specific. And this is part of like Tony Robbins' book and also other things, but it's like, okay, not just like, oh, I want more money, but why? What are the things that I want? And then how much do those cost? And like, actually then like, not what is the thing I want, but what is the experience? For example, like, I'm not saying this is me, but let's say, for example, Tony Robbins mentioned this, but it's like someone is like, oh, I want a private jet. And it's like, well, do you want that private jet, or do you want the experience of like, being on a private jet maybe 3 or 4 times a year? In which case, probably, you could probably rent it for hell of a lot less and get the same sort of thing out of it. Or maybe it's not even like, maybe it's something a lot more subtle, like where, you're saying you want something, but it's just the experience of like that freedom or whatever, and you can get that for a lot less. And then really going like, okay, what are those things I want? And like what I found is that really a lot of those things don't really cost that much. And actually what I found is that quite a lot of those things I could do today and I wasn't doing it. And that was like a real, like almost like I got hit by a sledgehammer in a way, because it was like, fuck, like, because it made me really question, like, why am I doing these things, like in terms of the money elements, if I'm not doing them today? And like, then it just started really reframing things. So I think that's the one thing I'd say, is at least it helped me in going like, okay, because I think a lot of people have like kind of target incomes, but if you ask them, they're probably plucking a number, or they're just like, I want to be rich, or they're like, okay, how much do you want? I don't know, maybe 10 million. It's like just plucking a number. But I think what really served me is actually diving into that. And I'd really, if you want a bit of guidance on this, just get Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game. It's one of the things there. So yeah, to answer your question though, I don't think too much would change, because pretty much what I'm doing now, all the things are just leading towards that goal that I've mentioned for Agile Entrepreneur. I'll probably just do it in a way that's a bit more aggressive, like take some more risks.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Thank you for that. I think it's a very deep question, isn't it? It's a difficult one to answer just on the spot, but I really like what you said there. But just touching on what you said about people plucking a number out of thin air, it's probably people are just plucking a number out of thin air, whether it's just it looks nice in your mind, or it's a nice round number like $1 million or pounds a year or whatever. Have you had specific dollar or pound goals in the past, or do you have them now, or do you prefer having more of an infinite goal? So this is what I've been thinking on recently. It's like, is it good to have a set dollar figure that you want to make, or will we get to it and then you'll just raise that up? Or is it better to have more of a goal of, say, I want iGen to be growing exponentially for the next 10 years, which is more of an infinite thing, right? And you're never going to reach it, but it's the joy of the journey in that respect. I don't know how you feel about that.
I think it's both. Like with iGen, it's not really like a monetary goal. And then, but there are things within that. Like there are things with iGen where there are monetary goals along the way. And there's also other things, like, for example, like how many, like what % of our client base, for example, or how many people are attending a group call, and like what is our, like our feedback score on like deliverables and all these kind of things. How many people are we impacting? But, there's all these different like measurables, and like money within iGen, it's a business. But money personally, like, I have specific money goals, and I have different tiers in terms of like, what is my target income right now? And I do an exercise where I do money mapping. So it's like, for me, that amounts to £12,750 a month, and 50% of that's to my wealth building. And so I basically, take each month, I go, okay, well, in March, there's 31 days. I think it's 31. Yeah, 31. So I divide 12,750 by 31, and I just go, okay, well, this week there's this many days. Like, the start of the month is not going to be 7. Like there was 6 last week. And then I go, okay, well, that number, which is, I think it's around 420 usually, times by 6, that's my target for this week. And I kind of like break it down and I track it. And it's just like, am I on track? And part of that measuring then becomes sort of self-fulfilling in terms of like, you kind of find a way to make it happen. But also then as well, it's like actually paying yourself. It's like, how many people just kind of scale the business and don't pay themselves? And this links into another good book, which again, I've got here, like Profit First. And actually, if you're saying that goal, like actually paying yourself, and it doesn't need to be necessarily the amount, but now it's like, okay, I've got my business to this point, and I'm going to make damn sure that I'm paying myself £12,750 each month, and that's after tax. So I've got a tax account set up, and I pay a certain percentage there, depending on where it's coming from, and like different tax rates. And it's just rough. And then I have, like my wealth building account, and that's like for longer term investments. And I have a strategy there with like stocks and shares ISA, maxing that out, and then other things as well. And then I have like personal spending, and I have like a few different buckets there. Like generally speaking, I put 25% into just like my day-to-day living, and 25% into like longer term stuff. Like if I'm going to go to Gran Canaria for a month and I want to get a place there, I'll take it out of there. If I want to go on a cruise, or I want to go to the Super Bowl, it's like, these kind of things there. And I have then different, like sort of, I don't budget at the moment. It's something I want to do because I think channeling money is quite powerful, but I don't do it too much. So yeah, to go back to your question, because I know I'm waffling a bit now, it's like, I think there's two different things. I think it's having the horizon, which isn't really monetary, but then also having those monetary goals, which do increase. You know, as you said, it's like I keep a diary, and it's like a multiple year one. So my first entries are from 2016, and it's like recently over the weekend I was doing my diary. I do it once a week, and I was looking at this entry, and it's like I got £14.55 in tips, and it's like more than usual from working behind the bar. And I was like super pumped by that. And now I did like a 40K product launch a couple of weeks ago, and it was like the same kind of feeling. It's vastly different. So, you know, you're going to change, but I think part of like the goals, like if you have that horizon or you have those goals, really the key is to spend time looking back down the mountain. And what I mean by that is like, you know, as you're going up this mountain of life, like taking the time not to currently always think like, oh, I want to get to this point, and feeling like you know, like you're never getting there because you're always looking at the next thing, but actually taking the time to really get the fulfillment from what you have achieved, like looking back down the mountain. And like most days when I'm journaling, I'll just be like, what were 10 wins or successes that I had yesterday? And it could just be more small things, but it's like taking that time to appreciate. And sometimes it's the reflections, like I just mentioned, like looking back on 2016 and how things have changed. And like you know, for me, it's like the Sunday dread feeling. I remember at university, it wasn't necessarily a Sunday, but when I was like having to go to do something, and like I don't get that anymore. So yeah, like these kind of things, like looking back down the mountain. So to answer your question, have a horizon, have multiple money goals, and make sure you take time to look back down the mountain.
No, thank you for that. I don't think you're waffling at all. That's super valuable content. It's nice to know that you go so granular with your goals and your monetary stuff. Like, I really like that. It's cool to know you've got a multi-year diary, like you do lots of journaling, because this is stuff that I've started introducing recently. I just feel like it's really useful. And also, yeah, I love the fact that I don't have the Sunday scaries, the Sunday anxiety anymore. But you spoke about, so you've mentioned Tony Robbins' book, Money. I've read that. I can recommend that. That's a really good book. I haven't read Profit First. That sounds like it'll be good and useful. But do you have any other recommendations that you've read since 2016 or whenever that have like really impacted you personally or helped your business move forward?
Yeah, I've got to mention one because it's kind of like really, it's really helped with the whole mindset I guess I had to the Amazon thing, and that's Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week. So that I read like just before I sort of started with the Amazon stuff. It was that summer where I was really like looking into it all. So yeah, that was massive. Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week. And then a lot more recently was my mentor I mentioned, AJ John Amex, his book Unstoppable Beacon. That's really interesting. Like, just the reason why is it's just like it's a very different frame to personal development. A lot of personal development feels like it's kind of, telling you the way, like the outcomes. It's like, these are the things you should be doing or the way you should be feeling kind of thing. And like, here's why. But like, you can't just do these things. Like if you go and journal and you're having resistance to journaling and you don't want to do it, it's not going to be sustainable. You're not going to get the fulfillment from it. It's just an example, but like really, AJ's approach is to really dive into like these subconscious things and like get to the roots of those and to have these internal shifts, and to really like to not look externally for like answers, but to look within for those answers there. And it's really interesting because that's the biggest change I've had. Like it's a lot of stuff that people might, like AJ says, like I live up in my head. I'm not exactly, but like I spend a lot of time in my head, and like really over the past maybe year or so especially I'd say one of the biggest things that's changed for me is like really then coming more into like my heart and my body in terms of like where I'm like being more present and things like mindfulness and journaling and these kind of things. And it's not like just go and journal 15 minutes each day. It's like really actually, I don't know how to describe it, maybe with like actually diving into it and like doing it because I actually want to internally, not because it's like, oh, journaling your life's going to be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think those are great recommendations. I'll have to check out the Unstoppable Beacon. I've never heard of it. But speaking of mentors, you said you had 2 or 3. I mean, everyone has mentors along the way in the forms of, say, books or podcasts, or if you have coaching calls with people. But it sounds like the ones that you have at the moment are maybe seem a little bit more formal. Or do you want to elaborate on how you met them or how that relationship like developed?
Yeah, sure. It's actually an interesting one because some people listening will probably know that. So essentially, like, I'll go back. I'll just tell the story. So when I built out the blueprint, the Amazon, the Amazon blueprint that I put together based on my business, and I put it into a blueprint format, and then I put that out there. And pretty soon after, someone I know who I just met through like Facebook communities who I respected mentioned that he'd read this book by Ben Slater. And so I bought the book, and then I got a call from Ben's sales guy, and then I'm like on a call with Ben, and I jumped into that program. And so I had a lot of coaching from Ben. I learned a hell of a lot from that. And so then August last year, Ben's like got into NFTs, and then eventually like actually ended up building this business with Ben. And we had a bit of a clash of values, and we've gone our separate ways now. But along that journey is where I met AJ and Jonathan. So Ben knew AJ and Jonathan quite well, and they were actually, involved in that community and helping actually with the coaching. And so through that, that's how I met AJ and Jonathan, and how that's how I met them.
That's cool. No, it's just because I wanted to touch on that, because it seems like a rhythm like running through a lot of this conversation is that you've reached out to people doing better than you, and that's been huge for you. And that seems to be the case for a lot of the people I've been speaking to who are successful on Amazon. And it's something that I did too late on, probably because I was just being too frugal, and I just wanted to kind of like exaggerate that point a bit more, because it seems to have been really helpful for you, right? And I feel like it's helpful for everyone, because it just makes sense that if you pay up for someone who's doing way better than you, you're going to get the value. But I think a lot of people don't see the value. They'll see, I've got to pay this person $300 an hour. How am I going to get $300 worth of value? Because it's not, there's no tangibility to it, right? There's no, you're going to speak to someone for an hour, you're going to immediately, it's not like you go onto a website, you buy 2 Barbie dolls and you're going to be able to profit from them, right? A coaching calls, you're not getting that. So like, would you have any advice for someone who's either sitting on the fence or completely dismisses coaching, like basically talking to me 4 years ago, probably?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. It's like, part of the coaching is, again, it's like, if you go and jump on a coaching call and you don't do anything with that information, it's like, if you're just looking for that answer and it kind of soothing you, like anything, like if you go to a seminar or to, you get a course, or you buy a book, you buy a book and it's like, I'm the person who reads these books and I'm improving myself. And then you don't read it, or you kind of read it and you like don't do anything with it. I think that's the key thing. And like part of the coaching is great as well. Like it's almost self-fulfilling, because if you get coaching, a lot of it's probably where you're talking, and just by talking through stuff, by like actually voicing the stuff, that's super, super helpful. And you don't necessarily need a coach for that. Like a journal is great for that, or just having like a network where people in similar position to you can talk to. So you might not need a coach for that. But coaching, I think, it can be super, super, super valuable, like for many different reasons. But I think it's really setting the intention, like what do you want out of the coaching, like actually showing up. Like it's amazing, for me it's amazing, like the frustrating thing, like, and why I don't really do much coaching myself personally in terms of like coaching calls. For those who Arjun, like Eamon is our coach within that community. And a lot of the frustration I had in the past is like where people, for example, I don't want to be repeating myself a lot. And like, that's why I like having structured video content with then like support resources. But then more so, it's like when people, show up for a call and like, then they get, like, okay, these are the steps to take, and they don't do it. And it's like, it's frustrating from a coaching point of view. But then as like a client and for myself, like when I'm going into coaching calls, I try and it's like actually leveraging that. And like, whether it's coaching or meetings or just calls in general, what I find is that they're super useful, but they actually generate more things to do. Like I find like meetings, calls, and these kind of things, it's often not like going to reduce the time that you're spending. It's often like actually it's going to help you, but it's going to give you things to go and do. And then you've got to actually go and do those things. So looping back, it's, like I'm, at the end of the day, I'm not really, I don't know about like, if people want to get on a coaching call, great. Like it's, for me, a lot of it now is like almost shifting for me. And it's kind of this thing again with sales. It's like, you know, don't necessarily need to sell people. Well, I don't know. I'll take that back. Like, there's a lot of power in selling people on this thing, because if you know, like, let's say, for example, you're a doctor. It's like, you know, if you can diagnose someone and you know what is going to help them, you almost have like a moral obligation to do that. And like, this is the kind of way I approach sales calls. It's like, if I felt that I could genuinely help someone, I would almost had that moral obligation. And it's like, you could have the best products ever, but if you just walk up to someone on the street and go, you need this, even if you genuinely believe it, they're going to be like, what the fuck? So that's like where sales comes in, and what I meant by, you know, selling people on this future desire, and then like having this product, this solution that's going to help them to get there. And to go back to coaching, it's like, you know, what do you want to achieve? But this is where it's almost a bit of a paradox then. And like with AJ and Jonathan, the thing I found super interesting is that like, it's stuff that I didn't even know. Like, I didn't even really think about the whole personal development thing, where it's like, you know, now it seems really apparent, but like people kind of saying, you know, this is how you should be feeling, this is what you got to go and do. And like actually really having that change and like actually working on the internal types of things. And like I do something, I've actually got it later on tonight, where I have a call where it's like, you know, feeling into my emotions and almost like a meditation, and like kind of, yeah, like just talking about things and feeling the emotions that come up in like different parts of the body, and actually just like being present with them and kind of exploring those. And it's stuff that like 2 years ago I thought was just like wacky as fuck and like wouldn't have even thought about. But like now, as I've explored that, it's stuff that like it's integrated with everything else, and it's like helped me. And so I guess the point I'm trying to make is, it's like, I didn't even know that stuff was helpful, but it was like this curious mindset of just going and exploring and diving into that, you know, as I mentioned, like diving into that resistance, that hard stuff to do, the stuff that's not easy. So going back to the coaching, it's like, you know, if you're looking for a coach, like, oh, this person's going to solve everything in like an hour and it's going to make the world everything and I don't need to do any work, I think that's the wrong way to look about it. But if you're like, you know, you've got specific things you want help with, for example, maybe it's more tactical. Like I had a coaching call with Thomas Parkinson in the past, or a few, and it's like I had very specific things I wanted help with because I knew he was further along, which is very different now to like my calls maybe with Jonathan, AJ, or Elias, so I have it with on a Tuesday, where it's a bit more exploratory in terms of really on this journey to get more out of myself. Does that make sense?
No, it's super interesting that you frame coaching call is kind of like audio journaling. I've never really thought of it like that. You're almost getting the answers just by talking things through. I also asked that question assuming that the client having the coaching call is going to do the work, just because I know that you you will have implemented your coaching call stuff, and I'm likely to do the same. Whereas, yeah, it must be frustrating if you are a coach to dish out all your best gossip, well, not gossip, all your best value, and then them just to not action on it. But that's besides the point. We'll assume that every listener is going to action the advice from this podcast or coaching call or whatever, really.
I think just the last thing I'd say on it is, like, especially with Amazon, if we keep it to that, like the way I had, you know, coaching calls for me and where I think they added value is just like, you know, at iJournal, we had the video training, and like I would only do the coaching with people who had been on or had access to that video training, because I wanted people to like utilize that information to then implement it, and we can review the implementation. That's where I can really add value. You know, like if I'm just sitting giving an hour lecture, like you can just watch the video training, and it's like it's going to be a lot more, you know, it doesn't waste my time. It's like, you know, you're going to pay a lot less. The value really comes when someone can like utilize that recorded information, go and implement it, and then we can review it based on their own personal preferences. Because, you know, like when you're presenting something to a wide range of people, you can't really, you know, you've got to try and factor in everyone's different circumstances. When you're like one-to-one with someone or in a small group, you can really like get to grips with specifics, but also really like review the implementation. So I think that's really powerful when you can like utilize information, implement, and then when you have questions over the implementation, I think that's when, like, in terms of like tactics and strategy, that's where coaching can be very useful. And as you mentioned, from someone who has achieved what you want to achieve.
No, that's great. I totally agree. Just got to make sure you have all the tools in place to be able to action the coaching call. So enough on coaching. Let's talk NFTs. So it would be awesome. So you've got an NFT free Facebook group. They're kind of all the buzz at the moment. some of the prices on anything NFT related have just quite astronomically increased over the last couple of years. They're obviously very new. A lot of the listeners won't have a clue what they are. So could you try to explain what they are, what the group's trying to do, and what you're doing this year with that group?
Yeah, sure. So, like, again, this came off the back of the stuff I was doing with Ben, and we ended up parting ways over a clash of values. And from there, you know, I took a step back and is like, is this something I still want to keep doing? And in terms of keeping doing, it's like, it's, you know, like Amazon, it's another way for people to make money. It's a very tactical thing in terms of flipping NFTs to generate profit. It's about making money. Like Amazon is a lot about making money. And so it's like, really, it is that. It's like, it's trying to provide people with another way to make money. And so I'm actually working with Luke again and a couple others now on this, to then, we're really like turning it into a blueprint. So with Ben, it was kind of, Ben was the main person there really, like in terms of structuring it and how he wanted things done. Now, like, we're taking it back into the Agile Entrepreneur way and trying to turn it into a blueprint, and really a way it's like where we can have a system for people to make money. And that's kind of really as simple as it is. Like, you know, I could go on and talk about NFTs and a lot about it. And it's like, at the end of the day, for people listening who don't know what NFTs are, you know, it's one of those where there's definitely potential there. But I would say it's probably something that I would suggest people put a bit of time, you know, maybe a few hours each week, if you can. Like, if it's, you know, I think, again, this is the difficulty where I'm speaking to a large amount of people, but in general, I would say I would generally advise people to at least be looking at this. But I would say if you are looking at it, then do be careful, because there's a lot of, I guess, like with most things, there's a lot of sort of, especially in the NFT space, like FOMO creation, like fear of missing out, like a lot of hype, like a lot of time sensitivity, a lot of sort of scarcity. And at the end of the day, a lot of, like, you know, like an Amazon product has a lot of tangible value. NFTs, a lot of them are just a pile of crap. There's a lot of zero-sum games, and what I mean by that is like where, you know, there's not value creation. Like, there's people getting rich at the expense of other people. There's going to be people at the end of the day who are like left with this worthless piece of crap that's got inflated value. And so my point is, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just like, I like the NFT technology. I think NFT technology is going to be super powerful and game changing, like blockchain crypto technology. But at the moment, like a lot of the ways around making money from those NFTs, I think there's a lot of risk to it. And we're trying to do it in a way where it really mitigates the risk. Like, for example, if you can buy an NFT, sell it within minutes, and have that crypto, which you can then like take some profits on and turn back to cash, like with sort of profit first type method where you're taking profits, there's very, very little risk to that, and you mitigate a lot of the risks. So that's the kind of way we're looking at it. And again, I won't get into too much detail, but because at the end of the day, if you, like, my advice, take it or leave it, is to spend a bit of time looking into NFTs, but not to just like blindly jump in and to like go, I'm going to buy this NFT and hold it for a long time and, you know, make a lot of money for it. I'd really like dive in. And there's a guy on Twitter who, if you're going to jump in, I'd recommend spending like a few hours just literally reading through all his threads. It's called Punk6529. He's got one that was really, really good. I think start of this year, or maybe like November. Yeah, start of this year, about like how to make it in crypto for the average person, and that was super, super useful. So to summarize, like for us at Icon Entrepreneur, we're creating a blueprint to help people try and have a systematic way to leverage the NFT landscape of the way it is at the moment to repeatedly make money. In terms of NFTs as like a macro thing, I think it's going to be great technology for the future, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who lose money in the short term because they are buying into things in the belief that they are going to rise in value over time, when really these projects have, most of them have zero value proposition and are just going to, I think, collapse at some point. So that's my thesis and what I'm doing about it in a nutshell. And I think what's kind of more interesting, at least for me, is how we at Icon Entrepreneur are kind of leveraging the NFT technology to actually create our own project.
Oh, so you're creating your own NFT?
Yeah, so like that's, you know, for us, I didn't want to basically just create an NFT for the sake of it, but the way we are doing it is that we are launching a project where each NFT serves as two things. Like one, it's like an access pass to resources for entrepreneurs, for like personal and business development. So it's like an access pass. So things like, access to potentially to scholarships, to like a Dragon's Den Shark Tank type thing, to, personal development resources, to business development resources, to retreats, conferences, these kind of things. That's the one element. The other element is it's almost like buying, like a stock or a share in the Agile Entrepreneur brand. The idea is, like, my thesis is like, if you want to bet on me or on the Agile Entrepreneur brand, then it's like you can do that. And the idea is, well, then over time, if the brand delivers, then the value of the NFT will rise because it will become more desirable. Now, I'm not trying to call myself Gary Vee or Elon Musk by any means. I don't mean that at all, but I'm using that as an example of people like, for example, if you wanted to bet on Elon Musk, like a lot of people did, and they would invest into his companies in whatever way that worked back in the day. Again, I'm not trying to say that's me, but like, for me personally, this is the opportunity I'm giving people, is just like, you can have this NFT where you can leverage the value. And then if you're done, you want to leave that community, you don't want to utilize it anymore, then you can sell the NFT to potentially get your initial investment back, to potentially sell it for more money. And that's where you could also just be holding these NFTs as well. And, like, then, for example, say there's a conference ticket, then that would be like an external ticket. So then you could even sell that. Or, yeah, we're just trying to make it like really leverage that NFT technology in a way that we can, going back to the point, it's like increase our customer base and serve as many people as possible. That's the broad idea around it.
Sounds really good. I'm sold. Send me an invoice. But would you liken the current NFT? Firstly, would you say it's a bubble, and would you liken it to the .com bubble in the sense that you were younger than me, but I was only about 10 or whatever when the .com bubble burst. So I don't know anything about it other than what I've read, but it seemed like loads of websites like pets.com were getting billion-dollar valuations, but there was no grounding there was actually no business behind it. It was just a domain, or there wasn't much going on. So would you say that is a lot of what's going on with NFTs now? And allied to that, as like a second question, is like, is the advice in your group to bet on projects that look like they do have long-term prospects, or are you trying to get in and out for a quick flip, make a quick buck? I don't know how it works.
Yeah, for me, I think like, as you said, I wasn't around .com, but from what I can see from people I spoke to, like, even indirectly, I like a lot of Gary Vee stuff, and I say indirectly because I actually got to ask him similar sort of question along these lines at NFT NYC, the conference, which was quite cool. And yeah, it's like his thesis as well is that a lot of people, put this mask on that they're like, the NFT technology is going to change the world, and like Web2 is evil and Facebook's evil and all these kind of things. And it's like, well, I'm not going to get into that discussion really, but for me, what's key is like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's garbage that is going to drop in price, and potentially even the good stuff potentially is going to have like a drop. So for me, it's a balance because it's risk reward. And there are projects that I have been holding for a decent while. And like, there are a few things I'm holding, but I'm not looking to hold them for like years in general. And there are things which I am just flipping. Like, I had a Facebook post recently where I literally made 1.5 Ethereum in, which is, like £3,000 in the space of like 4 minutes, like no exaggeration. It's genuinely like that. And, for me, it's a balance. And I'm also looking for, and I'm in a way kind of hoping for, because I feel like I'm prepared for it, like a 2008 type crash or like a .com. It's not like I'm hoping for it and like I want people to suffer, but it's like something to me that it's like inevitable. And it's like, I'm not really hoping, but I'm like prepared in the sense that I have liquid cash, different, diversified stuff that if it does happen, it's like, I hope I can have the conviction, like I say I will, but when you're faced with a huge crash, it's like, what's your entry point? That's the tough part, to actually pull the trigger. And so I hope that I can leverage my position or preparation for that, so that when things do crash, there are some NFT projects and there are some cryptocurrencies and there are like other just general stocks and shares that I would like to get involved with. And so that's what I'm kind of preparing for, and why, yeah, I have some things that I'm holding for a longer term. And if they crash, they crash. If they go up, amazing. But it just comes down to kind of risk reward, I think. And that's why a lot of my stuff at the moment is quick flips, because I see a lot of reward, very, very little risk. And longer term stuff, I think there's a lot of risk. And whilst there is a lot of reward relative to, say, like Amazon, I think there's a lot of risk there, especially like things are slowing down at the moment at micro level, and they have pumped quite a lot recently. So yeah, at the moment, very much a case of trying to flip the majority of stuff is just quick flips.
Okay, and I assume like taking profits along the way like leverages your risk, 100%. Right? Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say I don't really know much about NFTs other than the bare bones of it. So would you say there are any parallels between the skills you need to do well in Amazon and doing well in the NFTs? Like, are there any parallels? If there aren't, doesn't matter. But like allied to that, what sort of skills have you found useful to make profits with NFTs?
Yeah, I would say there are parallels. For example, one, like, the risk reward I mentioned, when you're looking at an Amazon listing and you're doing that analysis, for me, one of the key things you're looking at is what is the risk, what is the reward? Risk can come in multiple factors, like, potentially it's private label, potentially Amazon are going to come back on the listing, potentially it's going to be flooded by sellers, like all these kind of things you sort of weighing up based on different factors, but also based on your experience, and then you're balancing that with the potential reward. Like how much potential profit is there? What's the potential, like profit per item and the sales, all these kind of different things. So, and then you're looking at the risk reward in the NFT space as well. I would say yes. I would say though more in the NFT space, the biggest thing is like mental discipline is huge. I think I played a fair bit of poker, and I think that there's a lot of people who play poker who have had a bit of success in the NFT space because that mental like fortitude is huge. Yeah, really. The mental conviction is a massive thing in the NFT space, because you just, the ability to like just not, to really just systemize things and remove emotions. I think trading in general, from what I understand, like I'm not an expert on it, but from even Tony Robbins' book, from what people are saying there, and from what I've experienced and from what I've seen from other successful people, it's like that mental fortitude and be able to not be emotional in your decisions is massive in the NFT and the crypto space, especially because there tends to be a lot more fluctuation than your traditional sort of finance market. So yeah, I'd say that's the key.
That's interesting that you say. I was going to ask, whether it's kind of sounds like you are stock picking almost, but on a much shorter scale. So you're almost like a Forex trader or a stock trader in a way, which is quite different to Amazon in the sense that you will potentially hold Amazon stock for, I suppose you don't necessarily hold Amazon stock that long, so it is a different ball game though, isn't it? So yeah, it interests me, NFTs, but I just don't know how to start. So it's nice that you've mentioned the Punk 6529. You said that he's had an article, how to make it in crypto for the average person. If say I read all of his tweets this afternoon, like what do you think would be, and obviously joined the Facebook group, I think I'm already joined actually, and like took some of that content in, like what other useful action steps would you suggest that I take to get more well versed in NFTs?
Yeah, I'll send you that link now. And I think like the interesting thing with that is like when it's funny because someone asked me, like they want to get started, and I sent them this, and it's like it's interesting because people are like, oh, what's the strategy? Like, what's the answer? What's the system I can follow? And this thread's interesting because it's more like should you actually even be doing this? And if so, like, what's your sort of, what approach should you be taking? And like, are you ready for it? And that's that kind of thing, which I really like. So it might even be the case that you go, yeah, I don't really want to get involved in this. Or it might be the case that you do, and then I would say really the key thing is not skinning the game, but timing the game, in the sense of not diving into anything super quickly, but actually like doing paper trading. So paper trading, like you're not actually maybe buying something, you're just sort of watching how things play out based on what you would do, and just learning from that, like just like with most things, the more experience you get, the easier sort of becomes. And I wouldn't rush into NFTs because it's very easy to spend like a lot of money very quickly on, and very easy to lose a lot of money very quickly, as well as to make a lot of money very quickly. I think the key is like just having that experience and being able to really manage your emotions. So like before you do anything, set up these internal sort of systems and like rules for yourself. And like another guy I quite like in the space, who I'd say probably the next step is like JRNY Crypto. And then, like we're looking to have it out, the sort of the new blueprint version by the 1st of April. But it's like, potentially that's something that you might want to check out. At the end of the day, obviously it's going to be a paid training, but like we've sort of mentioned, it's, well, I'm not here to have the argument with people if they think courses and training is good or bad. It's like, if you see the value in it, feel free to jump on a call with whoever in our team is taking those at the time and see if it's a fit for you. And that's, I would say, especially in this kind of NFT landscape, it's the money is definitely there to be made, but there is a bit of risk there. So I think, checking that out and then going and just exploring and not diving into anything too quickly is the biggest thing.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And as you say, the reason I haven't jumped in is because I thought, well, if I can sharpen my axe in the books space and make more money there, it makes more sense to focus on one thing rather than two things and, diffuse my energy across two different things. And that's, I think listeners should definitely factor that in. If you haven't got one business dialed in, what makes you think you're going to be able to smash it with NFTs? Although you might be able to, because you might just have you might be really good at it. It's like you use the example of poker. If you're sitting there listening to this and you're really good at poker, maybe you'll be really good at NFTs. And as Luke said, in April, so this is probably going to get released around then. It's March now, so you'll be able to sign up to that. We've been going for over an hour and a half now. I want to be respectful of your time, but I just wanted to finish up on what is the rest of 2022 looking like. You obviously mentioned the NFT stuff, but have you got any other like travel plans, Amazon plans, NFT plans aside to the April thing that you'd like to mention?
Yeah, in summary, Amazon, like for the last year and a half, it's the same. It's just like keep ticking it over. The Amazon training, pretty much like supporting the team to with that. I'd like to scale that a bit more, but it's like through supporting the team to do that. The NFT training, so I'm working with Luke DeGan and a couple of others to get that blueprint out. So mainly leading that area. I'd like that out by sort of April, and then it's just a case of like managing there. And then the NFT project's the big one, so looking to launch that at the end of April, and then that'll be a case of ongoing, like delivering the value there, building out like, okay, how are we going to deliver like the Shark Tank Dragon's Den like thing, like the scholarships, the retreats, like getting cool people in to help. So that'll be really the focus, be delivery on that side. So those are the main things business wise, alongside like ticking over with my own personal finance things, like my own NFT trading. So there's a hell of a lot going on there. Probably too much actually, but I like doing lots of things. Then outside of business, coming into cricket season now. Cricket's massive for me, and I'm actually captaining this year for my local team, and it's pretty exciting. We've just signed someone who played Test cricket for Australia 6 years ago, so that's pretty awesome. It's kind of surreal. So cricket season is going to be huge for me, and then I'm looking at end of September heading over to Australia. I've been over for 2 6-month stints, and I'm looking to go back for another. I really enjoyed it over there. And I don't like the cold in the UK, and I enjoy playing cricket, and I can play more cricket. So, yeah, that's kind of the rest of the plan for the year for me.
Sounds pretty cool. I was going to make that last question, but I'd love to ask you, because you've just mentioned so many different things.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
what do you have any tips on how you deal with, like, potentially? I know you said you've got a lot of your stuff outsourced, but it sounds like you've got so many different projects. And like the potential for those to be shiny objects would worry me. So are there any systems that you have in place, or like mindset things that help you know what to focus on? And basically how do you deal with so many different like goals?
I think, the thing is, like, I only did the Amazon arbitrage until the point I had it like systemized, I think that was very beneficial. And now I'm not exaggerating when I say it literally takes me most weeks, maybe 10-15 minutes, just kind of checking any Slack stuff and emails. The only time it really takes me was like recently when I was filing year-end accounts and tidying up sort of tax return type stuff for the business. So it was like I did get all that done, and now it's literally, it just ticks over, and I get to like click buttons to like withdraw cash back and stuff like that and pay wages. It's you know, it's not much time. Then on the other things, like I admitted, like I'm not, part of me is like it's too much, but when I spend a bit of time like really journaling on these, diving into these things, like do I really want to be, you know, like NFT project, NFT trading, like a few different things at once? And I was like, yes, and I'm diving into that. And I don't have anything specifically, but I'd say just organization systems and getting good at like delegating and like the managing and like the leading. And these are all the things that I've kind of built up through the Amazon and the Amazon training. Like, for example, the blueprint structure for the Amazon thing, it's like now I can leverage that structure, like it's working. And obviously it's not going to be the same content, but it's like the same kind of structure. And then like now I'm not doing all the delivery. I'm getting like Luke DeGan, who's building this with me. Like he's helping some, you know, he's doing most of the legwork on delivery. Like, okay, what are the videos he thinks, for example? And then like, I'm like, okay, well, this is the structure I use in the blueprint. And like, we're going and comparing things like this, how I recorded all the videos. And like, it's like, you know, the big thing is and I did a post about this, it kind of linked into the NFT thing. It's like, you know, time isn't money. It's like you are an asset in the way. And like, for me, a lot of this stuff is like the stuff that I've done the hard things to learn. And like, now I can really leverage that in terms of my experience from building the Amazon business and building the, you know, the blueprint for the Agile Entrepreneur, and like actually then hiring people in Agile Entrepreneur, hiring people in Amazon, like building these teams. And now it's like, yes, it is new, but it's also not that new, because I'm taking the existing things and I'm just kind of implementing them in these different areas. And it all sort of, it's like, yes, there are different things, but it all kind of fits into this idea of having this brand Agile Entrepreneur, which delivers business and personal development things for people. And like, you know, having like an NFT blueprint and an Amazon blueprint, and having like this, you know, macro business structure, but then also like these teams within it. And like the NFT project, like, yes, it is something new, and that's the new thing, really. Like, that is the one new thing, because I haven't done that before, and that's tricky. But like that's something that will be like bringing a lot of people into the Agile Entrepreneur brand and being able to impact a lot of people. And yeah, that's like the big thing. Like, if it goes right, that's the thing that will add massive amounts of value to the brand. So I don't have anything specifically, but I'd say organization, and there's lots of different things within there. Like, yeah, there's too much there I could talk about for hours, but just organization in a nutshell.
No, that's great. It's a perfect answer and a great way to end. I could keep asking you questions for hours, because yeah, you've got some very interesting answers, and I really appreciate you taking the time for the call. Very grateful. Where can people find you on the internet? I know we've already mentioned, but if you've got anything else you want to plug, please let us know.
Just Google Luke Filer, I'm sure something will come up. Probably just Facebook if you want to get hold of me. But I would say if you are interested in the Agile Entrepreneur brand, I would say, at least for me, the biggest opportunity at the moment would be like the NFT project that is coming. Like, that's your way to, I guess, get exposure to the brand if it's something that you are interested in. And then like within that, if you're interested in something and you can't find it, you know, just Luke Filer, search Luke Filer, search Agile Entrepreneur. It's all on sort of Facebook. You'll be able to ask someone for whatever you sort of want. But if you want to, cool. And I hope this has been useful for people to have listened. And thanks for having me on. It's been good to chat.
It's been great to chat, and it's definitely been a super valuable conversation. We've covered a lot of topics, and I know that there's going to be some takeaways for the action takers. So yeah, thank you again, and hopefully we can do a round 2 at some point, depending on when our worlds collide. Maybe we might even be in Australia together, because that sounds like a good idea. We'll see. Maybe we could be in the same room. But yeah, thank you again, and I'll say ciao for now. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you've made it this far, you may as well leave this video a like. If you've been watching on YouTube, please subscribe and hit the bell icon for future episode updates. Or if you've been listening on Apple Podcasts, it would be absolutely amazing if you could leave us a review, as that makes a world of difference. Thank you again, and I'll catch you in the next one. Ciao for now.